Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Case file number 132, written by Manic Pixie 89. He walked by, she said. He said no, you're misled. I had a recent glitch that has been freaking me out for weeks. My husband and I live in a house with just the two of us, and a number of pets. The way our floor plan is laid out, you have to go through the kitchen to get to the living room. There's no way out of the living room without passing back through the kitchen either. I was in the kitchen wiping off the counter and tidying things up a bit and getting ready to cook dinner. I looked up and saw my husband walking through the kitchen and going into the living room. My dog, who was watching me clean the kitchen, stood up and followed him into the living room. I started talking to him, telling him some work gossip. When he didn't respond, I set down the paper towel I was using to clean and walked into the living room to see if he heard me. Sometimes he wears noise-canceling headphones around the house, so I assumed that's why he wasn't responding. But when I walked into the living room, he wasn't there. My dog was laying on the couch, but no one else was in the room. I called out my husband's name and he responded from the den, which is on the opposite corner of the main floor, so he would have had to walk right past me to get back there. I went into the den and asked if he had just been in the living room. He looked at me like I was crazy and said he'd been in the den for the last hour. Here's to hoping that the extra glitchy husband will pull his weight and do some chores around the house next time. Case notes, file number 132. So this would be the third story I've read with someone walking into a room, having been seen, only to not be where they should have been. And it's even more peculiar because your dog saw it too, which adds extra gravitas. In the other two stories similar to this, the person who was seen appeared in a different location altogether with no memory of it. The fact your husband didn't notice anything was off, he was just in the den. That is weird. Perhaps some kind of unintentional projection. Case file number 133, written by Hattyt. A house occupied by living and dead, yet it still remains their homestead. Some background on the house. It was built around 1650 near Oxford, England. My parents are pretty well off, so it's a nice house. Pretty big, but not excessive for a small village. And it's right next to a graveyard. As in, we have an outbuilding, which is an old blacksmith's forge, that literally sits on top of the graveyard, and our garden lowers compared to the graveyard wall because the place is so full of bodies. It was originally one house, then split to three with a small cottage, then to two houses, and I live in the slightly bigger one of the houses. The house has been a pub too. We still have a door from when it was. The land dates way back. We even have two Roman wells on the property. One covered over by the patio, one full of earth in the garden which had Roman artifacts found surrounding it by some old residents. It is old, so it makes sense that it's haunted, right? My family moved in February of 2015. My dad, my mom, my older sister, and me. We had no idea of any crap in the house at this point. At first, there were some weird vibes, some strange noises, some doors closing on their own, but nothing to freak out about. Apart from in the section of the house no one slept in, are then spare room / study / bathroom in a small upstairs wing of the house. Our printer was kept down there, and whenever my mom sent me to get printouts, I would sprint away as fast as I could, out of fear. I used to cry and protest going down there because it felt so terrible. There was just a thick air of terror. We actually got the village priest in to bless it about a year later. I went to a Christian school, and my mom thought it would put me at ease. Instantly, all bad stopped down that side of the house, and my sister suddenly moved rooms down to it, and her old room became our spare room and instantly got the same thick, heavy air to it. A few months in, was it April, my mom had a strange experience. The corner of the duvet being tugged on, and then a creature crawling up her back. It wasn't sleep paralysis. She'd had that before, and she could move. It was heavy, crawling up her back like a person, and it got to her head and then disappeared. A lady later came around. She heard the house got new owners. She'd lived there in the 1970s and told my mom that she'd had the exact same experience of tugging and crawling, and also that her piano played itself, among a few other weird experiences, before my mom mentioned anything about what she'd experienced, and my mom's heart sank. She didn't tell me anything until a few weeks later I came to her in tears, saying I'd seen a shape walk into the room and then disappear, and have something tug at the duvet and walk up to me in front of my body, and it was definitely not sleep paralysis. That's 3 people having the same experience, give or take how the person is lying, without communicating it. Weird. I can't explain the feeling of it. By this point, we are all aware of some weird crap. We even found chicken bones in the roof of our cellar, which is way older than the rest of the house, possibly like 1500s. We had doors slamming, we had footsteps, but then my dad had an experience too. He has never believed in ghosts. He's lived in old houses for a long time. He's had family friends have terrible experiences with the paranormal. He grew up Catholic, and he didn't believe anything until about January 2016. My mother, sister, and me were all in the kitchen, and he was walking past the spare room and heard shuffling coming from inside. He shouted my mom's name, asking if it was her, and a deep, gravelly voice replied, "Try again." He ran down the stairs, white as a sheet. At this point, 2017, everyone had been through something in the house. Shapes would walk past, disembodied footsteps roamed at night, objects moving, watchful eyes on your back, chairs moving, inexplicably ice-cold rooms, pretty typical things for a haunted house that were happening pretty much on the regular. At this point, I made some new friends and started inviting them around. The spare room had a double bed, so that's where we would have slumber parties. I had several friends ask me, "Hey, did you hear knocking on the walls or doors or windows or drawers last night?" Every time they came over, all separated with very similar recounts. I would then relay my stories and watch them turn pale. Fun for me, probably not for them. I had some friends over and we made a point of shutting the door to see if it would open, and it did. We all had trouble sleeping that night. In 2018, I had an exchange student from Germany at school, and my exchange partner slept in the spare room. On the last night of her stay, I had something knock on the slats underneath my bed. It woke me up, but I fell asleep again. It woke me up again a few minutes later, and knocked while I was awake. I left the room and told whatever it was to get the hell out, and it did. I slept fine the rest of the night. It did not like that the German girl was in the spare room. Around this time, our next-door neighbors walked up to us one day and asked if we had our house exorcised because of how terrible things were for them. Heavy footsteps would stomp around their house, disembodied crying of children and playing their glockenspiel in the middle of the night. They were terrified and presumed the increased disturbance was because we had it blessed. We didn't, but at this point the activity did slow. Every now and then, from late 2018 to 2020, we had banging and footsteps and touching and noises. Again, the usual. Nothing nominal, just small, creepy, unexplainable happenings. Lockdown was uneventful until November 2020. We had our kitchen remodeled. The kitchen was kinda remaining from about 30 years ago, so I reckon it really pissed off the ghosts to have it change. They were mostly fine with us in the house now. They knew us. We had lived there for 5 years after all. But our builder, they hated. He worked during the day when me and my sister were at school. My dad at work and my mom, who works from home, would run errands. One day, the builder asked my mom if someone else lived with us. She said no and asked why. He said he heard footsteps in my room, above the kitchen, and doors slamming, and voices and noises during the day that started the moment we were all out of the house. He also heard footsteps walk into the kitchen and stand behind him, thinking it was my mother and striking up conversation, but realizing she was out of the house when she didn't reply, and there was nothing there. Several times he thought someone was there with him and heard them move and breathe when they weren't there. He's a 6'2" burly, muscular firefighter, and he also felt a larger person, bearing in mind everyone in my house is 5'6" to 5'8", and we always hit our heads walking around. Leaning over him and looking over his shoulder, feeling them in his space. You know when someone stands next to you, and there being nothing there. Seeing this giant petrified was quite funny in honesty, but it's a strange experience. This brings us to present day. Yesterday, I was going out with my mom, shopping. I thought her car started, so I ran into the spare room to look out the window at the driveway to see her car, and the car wasn't started. I shrugged it off and kept looking out the window for a couple of seconds when I heard shuffling and breathing behind me. I spun around, and on the other side of the double bed was a kid, a young boy about 6, staring at me. He was pale, dark-haired, and dirty. He looked sick and malnourished. He didn't feel scary or mean, he just felt sad, and the room was freezing. I would have thought he was a real kid if he didn't look so out of place. We looked at each other for what felt like a lifetime, but was really 3 seconds, and I sprinted out of the room and yelled for my mom. I relayed the story to my parents and they were horrified. My dad went to look and saw nothing. My mom went upstairs and said there was the same thick, heavy air throughout the whole upstairs. It's like a portal opens up and the house feels so unnaturally wrong and hostile. It's unlike anything I've ever felt before in my life. Seeing it was easily the most scared I've ever been. It reminds me of when my neighbors said they heard children. I'm an atheist, but I slept with a crucifix next to me last night. Not taking any chances. So yeah, that's the story of my house and the hauntings. Super creepy, but it doesn't feel malicious. There's spirits, but they don't mean me harm. They're just trapped, I reckon. Hope you enjoyed. Case notes, file number 133. I would say this story speaks for itself. There are entities in your home. I don't know how you managed to stay around, but I guess it is your home, and it's not easy to leave it. I would say though, outside of the try again moment, none of these sound truly malevolent. Like you, I think they're probably just trapped there, but they don't mean you harm. Although the crawler spirit that went up on your mom, that's a bit creepy. But it strikes me more as like a deviant troll than outright malice. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, and you may as well start a binge session now. I have so many more stories on my channel.